I better not.
Off mics and I'll be better
Mumble.
behaved. I'm not saying anything more tonight.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. And Chair, when you're ready, I'll start recording.
Sure. All right, I am ready. Welcome all to this meeting of the Legislative Action Committee of the Santa Clara County Cities Association. If I could have a roll call.
Ann Bybee. Present. Katie Moore. Here. Greg Bazo.
Here.
Pete Daly. Kavita Tonka. Or Rajiv Bateja. Rob Moore. Or Matthew Hudas. Carmen Montano. Or Evelyn Chua. Ken Torin.
Here.
Mark Turner.
Here.
Ellen Kamei. Or Chris Clark. Ed Lowing. Or Greer Stone. George Casey.
Here.
Kelly Cox. Here. Tina Walia.
Here.
Chelsea Chang. Or Morley Srinivasan. Okay. With 8, we have quorum.
Lovely. With that, we'll move on to oral communications. This section of the meeting is reserved for people who would like to address the Legislative Action Committee on any item that is not on the agenda for tonight, but within the committee's jurisdiction. Are there any members of the public who would like to offer oral communications?
No one online.
No one online? Seeing none, we will close out that item and move on to our first item on the agenda, which is consent. That is the approval of the minutes from the Legislative Action Committee meeting of September the 11th of 2025.
More so moved. Second, Walia.
I'll open it for public comment. Any members of the public in the room? Anyone online?
No one online.
Seeing none, we will close out public comment and begin a roll call count.
Okay. Motion to accept the minutes from the September 11th, 2025 Legislative Action Committee meeting was made by Moore and seconded by Walia. Campbell.
Aye.
Cupertino.
Aye.
Gilroy.
Yes.
Montesrino.
Aye.
Morgan Hill.
Yes.
San Jose.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Yes.
Saratoga.
Yes.
With 8, motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. We will move on then to the chair's update. This is a wrap up on all of our tracked bills for the year. At this point, obviously, any bill that we've been tracking, aside from those that are constitutional amendments or bonds, should have gotten some sort of activity. Either they are moved on to the 2-year status, have been signed into law, vetoed, or otherwise died in committee. We'll go through them one by one. AB 262 by Caloza, the California Individual Assistance Act. This was a fire-related act from earlier in the year, is a 2-year bill. AB 846 by Connolly, incidental take permit for endangered species to facilitate fire safety, died in Senate suspense, so that bill is gone. SB 326 by our own Senator Becker, the California Wildlife Mitigation Strategic Planning Act, which was one that was supported by the LAC and by the board, and also by the League of Cities, was vetoed by the governor out of concerns for the budget. SB 252 by Valadares, a CEQA exemption for underground power lines, is now a 2-year bill. AB 66 by Tangipa, a CEQA exemption for emergency egress routes. This was a bill that LAC was watching and that was supported by the League, is also a 2-year bill. AB 300 by Lackey, State Fire Marshal revision of fire hazard severity maps every 5 years, died in Senate suspense for similar reasons to SB 326. AB 261, Quirk Silva, the State Fire Marshal regarding fire hazard severity zones, also died in Senate suspense for similar reasons. SB 607 by Wiener, a CEQA infill housing exemption reform. The provisions of this bill were largely incorporated into AB 130 and passed as part of the budget. The senator has since gutted and amended this bill to be the California Science and Health Research Bond Act, which is still in its House of origin. SB 677 by Wiener. This was a cleanup bill for SB 9, and SB 35 is a 2-year bill as it was granted reconsideration in committee. SB 346 by Senator Durazo, a transient occupancy tax for short-term rental facilitators, which we supported and which was sponsored by the League, was signed by the governor into law on October the 13th. AB 939 by Schultz, the Safe, Sustainable Traffic Reducing Bond Act of 2026 remains in its House of origin, so expect that one to get some activity in the coming year. AB 476 by Hart, which would expand the list of junk items that dealers are prohibited from accepting to include things like copper wire, and that we supported here at the Cities Association. I'm happy to report was signed by the governor on October the 13th. AB 1206 by Harabedian, the Single Family Home Pre-Approved Plans Act, died in Senate suspense. AB 726 by Avila Farias, Housing Element Annual Performance Report for Rehabilitated Units, which we supported at the Cities Association, was signed by the governor on October the 13th. AB 906 by Gonzalez, which was a housing element reform regarding affirmatively furthering fair housing sites, died in Senate suspense. AB 1359 by Aarons, an exemption for certain statewide housing regulations for jurisdictions meeting their pro rata share of RENA, did not advance. And in speaking to the author, he intends to repurpose that piece of legislation. AB 609 by Wicks, a CEQA infill housing exemption reform, was incorporated into AB 130 and may be brought back again and reused since it's technically a 2-year bill. AB 670 by Quirk Silva, the planning and zoning housing element converted affordable housing units, which you will recall we discussed and supported, was also signed by the governor on October the 13th. SB 282 by Senator Wiener, residential heat pump systems for water heaters and HVAC installations, died in Senate suspense. AB 11 by Assemblymember Lee, the Social Housing Act, is a 2-year bill, so expect that one to start to move again in the beginning of the year. AB 590 by the same Assemblymember Lee, the Social Housing Bond Act of 2026, is still in its House of origin. SB 336 by Senator Wiener, a real property tax welfare exemption for moderate income housing, died in Senate suspense. AB 650 by Assemblymember Pappen, which was a housing element process reform, was sadly vetoed by the governor over concerns that it shifts too much work in preparing local housing elements to HCD. We supported that bill here at the Cities Association. The League supported that bill. Almost every city in the state seemed to have supported that bill. SB 79 by Senator Wiener, transit-oriented development, on which the Cities Association took no position, was signed into law by the governor on October the 10th. SB 457 by Senator Becker, a reform to the Housing Accountability Act in terms of when projects can be denied, which we supported through the LAC, it turned into a 2-year bill, granted reconsideration on in policy committee. It may be reused in speaking with the author. SB 753 by Senator Cortese, a special business regulation regarding abandoned shopping carts, on which the Cities Association took no position and which the League of Cities supported, was signed into the governor on October the 3rd. It was signed into law by the governor on October the 13th. AB 736 by Assemblymember Wicks, the Affordable Housing Bond Act of 2026, which we are presently watching and which is supported by the League, is in Senate Policy Committee process at the moment. AB 632 by Assemblymember Hart, which was administrative fines and penalties for various types of judgments that have already passed through city process for nuisance properties, that we supported here at the Cities Association, and which the League also supported, was unfortunately vetoed by the governor on October the 11th. based on the signing statement, he says that he thinks that existing law strikes the right balance between property owner due process rights and local government authority to levy nuisance abatement fines. Those are all the bills that we tracked. If you think that there's one that was missed, let me know. I'd be happy to get you an update offline. Are there any comments from the body? All right. Any comments from members of the public? Online?
No one online.
All right. With that, then we will move on to item 3. Item 3 is an overview of a case that comes out of Southern California at the Second District Court of Appeal and has really serious implications for many housing elements, especially for larger cities across the state. The principal holding of this case is that if you have relied on an overlay that still allows for non-residential uses on sites that you've nominated as part of your sites inventory to meet your very low, low, moderate, or above moderate income housing, then these do not meet the requirements of AB 1397 unless they meet the specific carve out in state law for mixed use. So what does that mean for you as a city? I think it means you take this decision back to your city attorney and give it to them to make sure that your housing element is going to remain valid. The reason that I bring that up is that HCD may simply send you a notice of violation if they've gone through your housing element and determined that there's a problem. We don't yet know exactly what the process will be that they will follow for that. In the alternative, someone could simply run to court, just like they did with Redondo Beach, and invalidate your housing element. That's obviously something that you probably like to avoid. I think we all want to be able to have some say over what's going on in our own city. One of the reasons that I particularly note the consequences is that they're somewhat different from the way that this used to work. As you will recall, I think almost all of us have at least one builder's remedy project in our cities. It was fairly simple. They could say, okay, you're not valid. We're bringing this SB 330 application. We're locking in all the standards right now. And then, you were either going to have to go to court to defend yourself and say that, this isn't valid, or give over or try to negotiate something else. Pursuant to AB 1886 last year, which changed the standard for when you are compliant and who can say you are not compliant, this is not automatic. So just the fact that a court in Southern California says this doesn't work, this is not proper any longer, doesn't mean that your housing element is necessarily right now dead, or that you are not certified. You remain certified until either a court says you aren't or HCD says you aren't. So I would say, from my perspective, if I were in your shoes, go ahead and make sure that you don't have any infirmities in your situation. Lots of cities rely. Go ahead.
Sorry. Could you recap briefly as electeds, as we go back to our cities and maybe to our city attorneys briefly? I'm not looking for legal advice.
Sure.
But what we need to be aware of this?
Yeah, I think the thing that you're principally looking for is whether you relied on an overlay or anything that could constitute an overlay for any of the sites that are nominated as priority housing element sites in your housing element. So this doesn't, and this is the next point I was going to make, this doesn't apply to, say, an overlay that you created that doesn't account for sites specifically. And I'll give you an example. In Cupertino, we have a missing middle housing policy that allows you to develop certain types of single family homes depending upon where they are. It's basically corner lots that abut commercial sites, to use in the alternative to our single family standards, duplex standards. But none of those sites are nominated as priority housing element sites. So they're not meeting any of the standards for producing low, very low, or moderate income. They're just extra things. It's a policy that HCD required that we have. And most cities have something that is similar to this. They might have chosen a different solution. But just because it's an overlay doesn't mean that it's invalid. It's a policy. That's a separate thing. the overlay that is a problem is one that accounts for a site. And I'll give you an example. It's basically the ones that are here. Let's say that you have a shopping mall, and rather than rezone it outright for new uses, you give it the alternative of developing in a different way. You can say, oh, instead of the current use, even though this is zoned for commercial only, you can develop, 60 DUA here on this site-wide. Because you can also still develop under the old standards, the Court of Appeal says that's not proper, and that's not a valid site. So you could either rezone it outright to solve the problem, or you could make it meet the mixed use standards that exist in state law. They're specifically found at Government Code Section 65-583.2 subdivision H. The sprawling piece of law, but it's a specific carve out. The court notes it especially. So basically they do a two-step analysis. One, does this site allow for non-residential use? If the answer is yes, then the next question is, does it meet the standard for mixed use? And if it meets the standard for mixed use in this piece of law, then it should be fine. Does that make sense?
Here's the other option.
I'll keep it up.
Yeah.
Send that email to your city manager.
Yeah.
And ask them to review it and see if they have any concerns.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And they've got concerns. So
I agree. And so in other words, for when we did the housing element, allocated opportunity sites for housing density and whatnot, if it is zoned residential, whatever, that's it, then we are good. Or if it is zoned mixed use, for example, residential and or commercial is fine, then we are good.
Well, as long as it's not, let's say, purely commercial, right? If you could do a purely commercial product there.
50% or more residential.
Correct. Yeah, there's a very specific, I see you've looked up the sector.
What, okay, so help me with that. If it's only commercial, but we have not used it for an opportunity site.
If it's not used as an opportunity site,
no
you don't have to
problem.
worry about it at all.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't have to do that, but you might
Thanks.
have to, if you used, say, remember, you don't just have to have zone capacity now, you have to have zone capacity on an ongoing basis. So if, for example, it looks on paper like everything's fine, you didn't use an overlay everywhere, but maybe you used an overlay in some places. And that overlay is greater than the buffer, the difference between the total amount that you zoned for and the amount that you were required to plan for. If it's bigger than that and you're suddenly in the negative, then yeah, you've got a problem. And you might be able to do some creative things to solve it. But it looks like, to me, I would say the easiest solution here is just make sure that it meets the mixed use standard.
Okay, thank you.
I'll also say it's probably not enough to just like open up your housing element or open up your general plan and look for the word overlay, because there may just be a number of standards inside the general plan that amount to an overlay, and the court will look through whatever it's called in order to determine whether it meets the standard. So what you've called it is going to be irrelevant. It's whether it meets the standard or not. I'll also say there's a lot more that's happening in this case that involves specific sites. So it's not like they just stopped there. There were two specific sites that were also specifically challenged in the Redondo Beach housing element. Basically to say, these don't meet the evidentiary standards that you also have to satisfy, namely that there is a likelihood that it is going to be developed for for residential use in the coming period. And in this case, the sites in question had like grocery stores, big box retailers on them, where they had rights to the parking in the adjacent parking lot. But the housing element allowed for residential development on those sites and said, oh, that's where housing is going to happen. Well, if you have a lease, someone else has a right to it and is going to use it for the entire duration of that period of time. What's the likelihood that it's going to develop as a residential use? And so basically the court is saying that's not enough. How many cities are going to have this very granular level of analysis? That's hard to say. Smaller cities tend to have that type of examination. A bigger city might have a bigger problem with an overlay. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments, concerns?
Answered all my concerns.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to give your planning staff nightmares, or that they would have to go back and reopen any of this. Like I said, I think the easiest path is probably the mixed use, but the court is at least trying to give you some direction on where to go.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, I'll open it up for public comment. No public comment, Terry? The next one, okay. Any members of the public online?
No one online has a
Alright.
comment.
In that case, then we will move on from this item to item 4, and I was hoping that that would also be a useful tee up to some of this discussion, since we are about to head into the second half of this legislative cycle. I'd like us to at least have the beginning of the discussion of sort of what sort of bills you'd like to see us asking our legislative delegation for. We don't do as much of this sort of direct outreach to our reps as I think we could and should. And it would be nice to tell them what we would like to see, rather than just telling them, no, please don't do that, or yes, please do that other thing. And I know that Terry sent us a very nice email on a number of different thoughts, but if anyone else has ideas.
I got nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Not even after that case?
Yeah, no, exactly. Right.
All right, well, I'll offer these two, just from our own experience here. One is, we had a meeting that we had to significantly delay movement on, and this happens in other bodies as well. I'd really like to see some reform of the Brown Act's remote appearance rules for noticed locations, so that, you don't wind up in that situation where one person can't get online and then you can't have the meeting. That just seems really like a waste of time and money. And I know that some cities have tried to adopt rules of their own that would deal with that eventuality. I'm not convinced that those are legal. So it would be nice to provide, get the legislature to reform this piece of the Brown Act to at least sanitize those parts of people's policies, so that if somebody does drop off, you don't have to stop the meeting. Or if someone just can't get a connection, let's say they're traveling out of the country, power goes out.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a good result, that you would have to necessarily cancel that meeting just
We
because.
just follow the same Brown Act that the state follows. Right?
The No Brown Act?
Oh,
Yeah.
why not? Hey, it works for them.
So that's one thought that I had. If anyone has particular thoughts on it, because I'm sure you've encountered this situation, especially if you're on a number of regional boards. The other was that I think that no matter how you feel about housing in general, the housing element process is a really frustrating one for cities. It is also, not that anyone's going to be sympathetic here, it's a frustrating process at HCD, in part because the legislature kept changing the rules as they were examining housing elements. And frankly, I think it's just a very expensive process. It's a very nice bonanza for planning consultancies across the state who are all doing this at the same time. They get to charge a premium because everybody wants their services, especially a handful of them. And it seems like there must be a much simpler way of doing this that can still achieve the results. Obviously, the state wants to see us produce housing. But there needs to be, I think, a more scientific way of doing this than what we do right now. We rely on a lot of sort of legal fictions. We'll say, oh, this site, because it's zoned at 50 DUA, that'll necessarily produce low-income housing. Well, that's just a legal fiction. We don't know that. And then as you actually develop on those sites, you're probably not going to develop that. And then you have to go back and find new sites. That seems like a lot of extra expense. So something that would simplify this process, something that would make it more scientific, something that would be clearer to cities, I think it's valuable. But I'm really curious to see if anyone has very specific examples of things they'd like to see change.
We'll follow your lead, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it would be helpful that HCD sets their standard and doesn't change their standard, and if there's some way to accomplish that, because we went through, oh yeah, this looks great, and then, oh no, you have to do this, and then, oh yeah, that looks great, and then, no, you have to do this.
Mhm.
So it just seems that if they could apply the standard that they set forth in the beginning, we'd all be happier.
Yeah, and with that, I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean to
I'm
jump in,
ready.
forgive me. One of the things we dealt with was we would have one person review it. Everything was great. They either got transferred or left, somebody else reviewed it, had all kinds of questions. Got that straightened out. They somehow transferred or left, somebody else. We went through that over and over again.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we can address that issue with, kind of late. I mean, obviously there is no objective sort of standard by which they do this. It's just subjective based on who's looking at it.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a way of addressing that.
Or also sort of what their training level is.
Yeah, maybe that's right.
That's something that I think HCD has acknowledged, and that both advocates and cities have found frustrating.
Yeah.
That you talk to somebody, you have no idea what's going on, and some of this is all sort of the same thing too. Remember that comment I made about it being a bonanza for planning consultancies? Well, guess where a bunch of them went, right? They can make more money going
Yeah.
surfing there. So the fact that it's all happening at once is an issue, but certainly also for HCD when the rules are constantly changing and they're not used to having a lot of authority. It's sort of like,
Right.
if you have I don't know how many of you have a younger sibling, but if you've got, a younger brother or sister and they try to get into your clothes that don't quite fit,
Yeah.
that seems to be how HCD is operating. They've got clothes that they don't quite fit into yet. So I don't know how you solve that other than by giving them clearer authority or taking it away. Sort of simple as that.
I think take it away.
So I'm going to use the words used by Mayor Turner, very beautifully put. While cities are being asked to convert all subjective design standards into objective design standards, HCD has been extremely subjective, not objective criteria at all to review housing elements. My city submitted well within the time. It took HCD 24 months to certify the housing element with zero change of opportunity sites. And everything else that Ann Bybee said and Mayor Turner just said. So I completely agree. And what happened in the process? 22 or 23, I lose track, of builder's remedy applications, which takes me to the point I was initially going to make. So I completely agree with what has been said here. Those builder's remedy projects are ignoring zoning and are proposed, some of them are proposed with very high density in wildland urban interface area. That's going to be a problem for public safety. So the bill proposal is leave it to the city to decide, give them concession if they have flooding zones, like we were just talking of the storms in South County or in my city, whether it's flooding or wildland urban interface area, very high fire hazard severity zone from the state maps. Because at that time, all of that ours was identical, wildland urban interface and very high fire hazard severity zone. Or the evacuation routes don't exist, or inadequate, to be correct, inadequate evacuation routes. Because my city has gone through all of that with the numbers, arena numbers being too inflated because half the city is in MUI, and now there are builders remedy projects, high density. So if the city is forced to approve those projects, the builders remedy, because we have no choice, God forbid, at some point, if there is a fire like the LA fire, who is responsible? I will say very clearly, not city official. It'll be the state official. We take those comments from our residents. And it hurts us to think of those scenarios. So I think that's a couple of ideas there in the bills that people need to pursue.
But you're thinking to pin it to things like the fire hazard severity maps and so forth. So,
And flooding.
so would you want
Earthquake.
those updated on a greater frequency then?
No, I'm saying we should not be forced to have any housing. I'm saying two things there. Any natural disaster, we have the same area that is prone to flooding, earthquakes, and fire. And now there are builders' remedy. We didn't put RENA numbers. So as such, we got double RENA numbers that we have to plan elsewhere. And then thanks to HCD being subjective, we got builders' remedy in these fire hazard and earthquake / flooding zones. So we should not be forced to approve builders' remedy projects in those zones. Any city.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up is that that's a map that would change over time, right?
I'm not even touching the map.
Okay.
That's it. There are 10 issues there, but I'd say just the simplest request is leave it to the city to decide.
Any other thoughts?
Okay, so I serve on the Legislative Review Committee for our city. And we don't have direction from the city council for what sort of bills that we would be looking at. And now I will be going back to our LRC and speaking about legislation. And I feel as though I'm in a predicament because you're presenting views of your own for what bills to look at. And you're not on the Legislative Review Committee with me. And then, so I feel as though there's a real potential Brown Act issue. And then I had the same question earlier today when I received the email about the appeal. And I sent it to our city attorney and would have wanted to have a discussion with the mayor about it. But now I've gotten your viewpoint on this and some advice actually to the members here. And I don't know if you've spoken to the city attorney about this already and had a discussion. It did not sound as though she had seen it when I emailed her. So I'm kind of concerned procedurally about having this type of a discussion since we both serve on the same city council and I have other rules that I have to play with regards to legislation. So
I
I'm
can
going
answer
to be
that.
silent on this matter,
Okay.
unfortunately, because you have spoken, but you are not the appointed person from our city. So it's quite unfortunate.
So I take the point. I did address this issue with our city attorney before, and there is no Brown Act violation by virtue of this being an open public and notice meeting.
But when I go and speak to the other council members, that's not, and that makes 3.
Okay, well, then maybe that's an issue with the way that the LRC is constituted.
No, I think it has to do with having 2 council members serving on this committee at the same time from the
This
city.
is not a Brown Act violation.
This is not, but if I want to speak to our mayor, I can't. So I think this is more the issue, and we don't have this issue with other
I've raised that.
committees.
I raised that issue with the city attorney, granted our prior city attorney, and he did not think that was an issue.
I don't think he envisioned that you would have this happen with 2 committee members from the same city.
I raised exactly this scenario.
I wonder, and I don't know that we're going to solve anything tonight, but since he is the designated chair of this committee, what would you recommend in future settings where that might affect your communication with your council? If we're looking to him to lead these conversations, what would you recommend we do? Or maybe it affects you obviously more than it does us.
Well, I think that gets into the perhaps maybe the guideposts for the incoming LAC. I think that this would be better, these topics would be better served at the board level, and that we had fewer bills that we were looking at. We should probably only have a handful. I was looking at another, and this is off the agenda, so I really can't dig into this, but I did find an organization in Southern California that was multiple cities, and they formed, they have a really, really great website, and they formed a really good looking platform. So they've got a section on housing, homelessness, land use, budgetary and fiscal matters, public safety, transportation, environmental, AI, and economic development, tourism, healthcare. So I would want the board to come up with a platform and different issues that we collectively agree on before we endeavor to be looking at different bills here.
Got it.
If this organization is to continue, if this committee is to continue, I think it should meet a lot less frequently. And if it's going to, and have very few bills that we're looking at, unless there's been an agreement from the board. And another issue we have is that we don't have a lobbyist. So in Cupertino, we do have a lobbyist that advises us. And we have a legislative platform that the council adopted. So whenever an item comes to the LRC, it needs to stay within those rails. And if something is outside of that, then our liaison automatically sends it to the full council for review.
So for here, though, you're going to make some recommendations with regard to this body and how often we meet and discuss. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think
Okay.
when we get
Okay.
to the next meeting,
Okay.
we should all probably talk about that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So on the topic of bill ideas, does anyone have anything else before we move on to the next one? Because it sounds like we're already bleeding into take public comment.
So, Terry Hans, Campbell City Council, this is my opinion, not Campbell City Council opinion. I've submitted a letter to the group. It's my personal opinion, not the city Campbell nor the city Campbell council decision. I attended the League of California Cities 2025 in Long Beach. Several of you that were there. I was impressed with everyone I met, and the content and material was terrific, with one exception. I was the voting delegate for Campbell for the General Assembly, but there were no resolutions to vote on. I believe that was really a missed opportunity to send a message and influence to Sacramento. We as city representatives are striving for support and funding around housing development, addressing homelessness. We were just in a meeting this morning about the development, multimodal transportation, conservation. We all want those. Maybe I'm a newbie, expecting perfection. I'm not an NB, but I think it feels like we're getting more laws, demands, and constraints rather than achieving help for successful city management. I believe the Cities Association, we're the home of Silicon Valley, technology capital of the world. We have a tremendous voice that we can bring to Sacramento. And I encourage the legislative message to be strong, unified, and concise in requesting legislation to support Santa Clara. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Hines. Are there any members of the public online who would like to speak?
No, no one
Yeah.
online.
Okay. All right. Unless anyone has any additional comments on item 4, I'll move on to item 5. Item 5 is an opportunity to offer some input on how this body should function in the coming year. We've had some discussion through the executive committee on making sure that relevant issues are on the calendar for the year so that it's clear when things are going to be happening and people know that. I think that there's also some general notion that we should be able to put the bill position letters online in an easier to find spot, and that they can be tracked in a manner that is closer to the way that the League of Cities does it. Some additional things that I've noticed are just basically I'd like some stronger guidelines for all of our document posting. And I'd like to see some stronger collaboration between whoever chairs the committee and other members of the executive committee in terms of getting support on work too. Vice Mayor Moore's point, it would be very useful if we had some budget for the use of the lobbyist. Right now we kind of get Townsend on loan occasionally to do presentations, but it does make it a lot harder on the chair because the chair is doing basically all the work to find the information. And if it's somebody who's new and hasn't ever interacted with Sacramento before, it's a bit of a lift. So it's helpful to have some experienced guiding hand out there. And if there were some budget for that, I think it would be very helpful. I did also have on my own notes whether it would be helpful to have more bills on the agenda or fewer bills on the agenda. What we think the right number would be. It did seem that at least for our discussion, we could get through about 4 comfortably per meeting. It was a little different, I think, last year. If that's your recollection, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that sounds right. We were, the way I handled it last year in 2024, when I was Legislative Action Committee Chair, I would give out information on more bills, but we typically just went through about 4 to 5. It depended, and I tried to club some of those. There was a lot of public safety activity going on last year, and we supported almost all that we brought here. And there was an overlap, so it was easier to get through more. So it just varies on the content and how straightforward they represent. The housing ones that so the public safety ones we supported at LAC here were signed into law, almost all that we worked on. The housing ones, we generally had a pretty unified voice here. Our concerns on some of these issues that we just spoke about 5 minutes ago, unfortunately, they all got signed into law in spite of our concerns, and we sent letters very respectfully written, drawing out issues, how they would be impacting us negatively. And of course, we are seeing those negative impacts across the cities. And that's why I found that at Cities Association, we work together for all the cities at the county level rather than just our individual cities. And that's the best part I have found. Thanks.
Chair, may I offer a clarification?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the website is going to get updated, but last year's LAC letters were uploaded to the website, but they were not done by me. They were done by city staff from the city of Los Altos. And I have not reached out to Sunnyvale staff to do the same thing this year.
No, this is not a critique of your.
But I just want to explain why last year's letters are on the website and this year's are not.
Okay. In that same vein, the question is did you find the discussions with our representatives in Sacramento useful when they came and spoke to us? Would you like to see more of that in the future? If so, when? And in what form? And how long do you feel like each one of them needs? That seems to be part of the broader spectrum of what we're doing. And then, we do have the capacity to advocate on a federal level or advocate at the county level. We've generally focused on things happening in Sacramento. So would it be helpful to have, for example, members of the Board of Supervisors come in the same fashion that we had Assemblymember Ahrens or Senator Cortese or Senator Becker come and speak to us? Same for our delegation in Washington, D.C. So I put all of that to you as food for thought and seek your response.
One question is, any chance we can get these agendas earlier? Is that?
I mean, the agenda was out on what, Monday?
Yeah, it's uploaded to the website, like within the Brown Act regulations.
Okay.
So it'll always be on the website 72 hours before the meeting.
Okay.
The packet sometimes takes a little bit longer for me to put together.
Okay.
I think that was also a notation I had here is better guidelines on when certain things will be posted and so forth. Noting that sometimes there's stuff that doesn't appear until the day before because that's when it happened somewhere. So. Other thoughts?
So having served on this for a couple years, I sometimes see there's a disconnect between the LAC committee and the board because not the same players are at both tables. And at times the LAC makes motions and brings forth recommendations to the board. And a lot of times the board puts it on hold because a lot of the cities can't vote on it because they have to take it back to their respective bodies. So it seems that there might be I don't know, maybe we should be looking at a process that we could could improve upon that somehow. I've thought about possibly, not necessarily having a representative on LAC of every city, but have a subcommittee of the board, volunteers that meet and then present that at the board meeting and then, you know, either vote on it or bring it back to their respective cities. I just feel like sometimes there's a disconnect. And for my own personal, there was a time when there was another council member who was on the LAC who would make vote on things, but then wouldn't remember how she voted. And so then I come to the board meeting and it's like, okay, I I want to be consistent or know how she voted. And so it just seemed like, well, what am I doing? You know, what's the purpose of this?
Yeah.
If I can't take action on it, or I don't know, how my colleague voted. So those are some of the things that I've noticed that I don't think are that efficient in the process.
But just for the sake of clarity, the situation you're describing is there is one member from your council that is posted to this body and then a different person
yes.
who's on the board. Okay, all right.
I thought it was awkward when Townsend came here knowing that they weren't being paid by us for their lobbying. And I think it was the first meeting, they mentioned a bill that they had either co-written or co-sponsored, and it happened to be a bill that I had been told was unlikely to pass. And then there was an alternative, this was regarding the housing element, there was an alternative bill that did make it through, and that was the one, that I would have wanted us to be discussing, but it wasn't at that time. So that experience was it was a little frustrating and awkward. I'm very concerned about having a budget for a lobbyist here when we don't have a platform that we can collectively agree on. So I wouldn't want to increase the budget either. So I feel like this is a difficult committee to have a person singularly chairing and creating the agendas for each one of these meetings. You don't have really staff, you don't have a lobbyist. It really depends on who's in that position each time. And then to the point that we have council members that have to go back and get approval to take this or that position. It really kind of complicates the matter. And then you don't have consistency from this year to the next year, whoever's going to be there. Did they have experience on their own LRC? Have they created a platform before? Did they, have any of that kind of experience? So you can end up with a lot of variability for the quality of the committee. So going with budget, I'm very much worried about the increased cost. Looking at the budget that we have, other than the staffing overhead, the largest program that we seem to be doing is the Christmas party, the winter party. We've got like $10,000 going to that. So adding,
I don't know that that's relevant to this, but
well, are you going to add
understand
money
the
for
point
a
on-
lobbyist?
I understand the point on expense.
Yeah. Are you going to add money for a lobbyist, and are you going to take it out of the social events? That might be a place to do that. As to number of bills, as I said earlier, I would prefer it would trim down and that we have them at the board level, and maybe it's just 6 that we look at for the year, and that if the LAC is going to continue, I would want it trimmed down to maybe 4 meetings a year, and that would be it. And you would kind of stack them early in the year when the bills are coming through. So it seems like when we're meeting at this time, it's very late in the game, and even this appeals information that was shared, that could go directly to the board to be dispersed for the different cities, and then have each city's attorney would then weigh in on that and how they're going to address that issue. We didn't necessarily need to get together to have the discussion. It could have been handled a different way and a little more convenient. And with regards to these agendas, we're oftentimes, like with the chair update, the other wrap up on track bills, there's probably a document that you have these things listed on, and I don't know if we are going to receive that because we're hearing all this information. There's probably a presentation of sorts that could go to the website. And I don't always even understand what an agenda item might turn out to be once it's opened. Like even the overview of the new commune lawsuit, that appeal, wasn't sure what direction that discussion was going to go in, and if there's any action or is it informational. I'm assuming this is informational, so it might help if kind of a PTA agenda method could be adopted here, where we see this overview of this. It's an informational item, just put it in the parentheses or italics. Collection of bill ideas. Is this something that is going to be recommended to the board? I mean, I don't know what our function is supposed to be with regards to that. Where's what's the work product? Where's it going? And this last one, discussion on guideposts. Again, read the agenda, don't exactly know what this means. And so this is a Brown Act body, I should be able to understand what the agenda item is from the text here. So I think these moving forward can be a little more clear. And I know early on we had the issue where it was like a discussion about bills, and then the bill numbers weren't put into the agenda, and then that situation had to be straightened out later. So yeah, that's it. Anyone else?
I would agree. As somebody who's been here a year now, I have felt completely inept. I'm brand new and I hadn't worked on a committee like this before. So I think that mentorship in this would be something that would be great as somebody new coming in, just kind of even understanding what the deliverables of a meeting were. It took me like 6 months to start meeting with my staff before these meetings to say, like, I come here and really can take no position because I haven't talked to my city about it. And so it rendered me kind of useless. And then when I thought that I had that in place, my police chief framed me out about something that he wanted to have brought up that I didn't know. And so some kind of, and maybe I speak from like the very lowest end of the spectrum of this, but some kind of training that gets people prepared for this, because I understand that a lot of people are probably veterans at this, but there will be occasionally people who are brand new to politics in general coming in. And making sure that it is not just a good experience for them, but they're really understanding that they can bring back, even if they don't have that knowledge, on behalf of their cities, which I think goes into the timing piece of it as well. It didn't give me time to talk to my city about what was up, but if we preface that the week before knowing, or the month before, however it would work, knowing what we were going to be discussing, we introduce what we will be taking action on at the next meeting. I think for me, that would have gave me a lot more room to prepare. Sure. But yeah, so I don't know if I will filter out next year and then you get somebody else brand new and have to do this all over again. But
the concern, right?
Yeah, but mentorship, I think, would be really great in this.
Yeah, one of the practical problems that arises with, say, a lot of information on a bill earlier on is it's literally going through policy committees in Sacramento. And in this particular cycle, it was very frustrating because almost everything at the beginning was fire related because of what happened in Southern California. The rest of the calendar got pushed off and everything kind of appeared almost out of nowhere sometime between March and April. So trying to get your arms around that is tough, even if you were a paid lobbyist looking at this, because there are timelines that they have, sure, for things to be in print and so forth, but that's kind of nominal. And then you don't see a lot of it until later. So that's I hear the frustration because I experience it. yeah, coming into it, I know that we did some stuff at the beginning on sort of what the legislative cycle is and how it works, but this goes back to my point at the beginning. We're very focused on what's happening in Sacramento, and one of the questions is that really necessarily the focus that we want to have? We can do other things, and we do have an information sharing purpose here as well. So I want to make sure that we're honoring all of that. Anyone else?
Keep going if I can. I was just kind of, I'm hearing that there's like different structures in the different cities, and I feel like it would be great if we polled all of this committee and the board, if everyone was polled to find out if they have a legislative review committee of some sort. How is it structured? Like ours is currently like an ad hoc, but some of these might be codified. Do you have a lobbyist? If you do have an LRC of some sort, is someone providing you with that advice, or is it supposed to just come from staff? And then I'm also curious about the restrictions on taking a position that might be happening, because you need to get permission from your council before you do that. And how many of us have that situation? So with regards to, this would be great information, I think.
I think that's a good. I think that's a good thing for the board to consider, so that this can be a useful exercise.
Yeah, and platform. Does your city have a legislative platform that you need to adhere to, something like that?
I'm embedded in the charter. I know Sunnyvale has certain things embedded in its charter. They even delegate a certain amount of authority to staff to take positions. So it can really vary.
Yeah, and I've had this situation at the policy advisory committee where we didn't take a position on something, that item comes up. I abstained, but I really felt like I should have just go ahead and throw the vote in anyway. But I took the high road, didn't vote, and the group, it was the Stevens Creek Corridor Vision Study. The group voted it through and pushed it ahead. And it's like, well, you don't have a vote from one of the cities that would be impacted. That's not great. So there's that issue when you have that restriction. So you could be here probably perhaps knowing that your city would not want to support a bill, but the group as a whole is supporting it. You're abstaining, and then you're watching this vote happen. That was another question I had, was what happens when you don't agree with the committee's position on something. I guess in that case, your city can write its own letter, but you're going to end up on the letterhead. Your logo will be on the letterhead that's going to get sent out, even though maybe your city did support that bill. And that's what happens. Yeah.
Well, that could be a topic of discussion, that if a particular city chose not to, their logo would not go on the letter.
Precisely. Yeah. If that's a mechanism, or if we should require a different threshold for supporting or opposing something. I mean, we've always tried to bring bills that at least we felt would have some degree of consensus or an opportunity for consensus. And I hope that at least as you've seen us work, I've tried to get us to that point, because I think that at least speaking with one voice not only is clearer than to the delegation there, but is also less problematic amongst all of us.
And the voice of 1.8 million residents. I know the letters we were sending in 2024 carries a lot more weight than saying City of Saratoga 32,000 or 31,000 residents. The unified voice, that's essentially carries a lot more weight for advocacy. And I've heard from state senators and state assembly folks that does make a difference. And I've seen personally how they have reached out in response to something. Even if last year I was not supporting something, but I sent the letter as chair, because as you have heard me say so many times, we are a larger family supporting each other. What happens in one part of the county will find a way to impact other parts of the county. Just some of my thoughts. And I'm hearing great things here for, food for thought for the board to consider. So I'm glad you brought this item up here. for discussion tonight, to kind of wrap up before we get into the board meeting in what, 20 minutes or so?
Yes. With that, I'll offer public comment to anyone who wants to make it. Councilmember Hines?
Any comment I said that, there's a void of, message, from the League of California Cities that, I think, the board was just, voicing that the message can be consolidated and, concise and, read from the percentage, that's stronger that's gonna be.
And online.
And no one online has their hand raised.
All right, then I will close this item and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much, everyone.